Today I'm at the home of Mr. John Scott, who's been collecting decorative and fine art furniture, pictures, glass, textiles and sculptures for over 50 years. Last year he gave his world-class collection of around 2,000 tiles and panels to the Jackfield Tile Museum at Ironbridge. This collection, which dates from the mid-19th to the 20th century, is perhaps the finest collection of tiles to have been held in private ownership in the UK. A dedicated gallery to house these tiles will open shortly at the museum, and rather fittingly, this was originally a workroom in the Craven Dunhill tile factory.
Yes, can I butt in?
Yeah.
I'm allowed to butt in. It makes it more fun if I
Absolutely.
I notice you use the word fine art. Now, this is kind of, I launch into something which you may get fed up, you'll have to stop me. But I'm basically collect decorative art.
Okay.
And you must realise, and I find it very fascinating, because one of the things that's taboo to talk about in Britain, well, the first thing is you can't really give a lecture on sex, can you, unless it's especially. But the other thing is class.
Yeah.
And you've got to realise, or at least I do anyway, that decorative art is definitely non-you kind of, you know, people from Birkenhead like me, and I can lapse back into it bloody quickly. That's decorative art, you see. People who wear overalls and they're greasy, and that's why it's all girls' fault, because when they have a son, what they say, you're not going to be wearing overalls. They don't say it, but that's what they mean. No overalls. I want you to be wearing a hard white collar and going to work with a secretary and being a solicitor, an accountant, an architect, or a, what else is there?
Doctor.
Doctor, actually, that's another. But that's a slight difference, because I don't do fine art, because it's too expensive. I like fine art, but it'd be too expensive, and then you have to pay an insurance premium for looking after it. Anyway, sorry, so shut up, Scott.
No, not
Go
at all.
on, yes.
So the first question I'm going to ask you, Mr. Scott, is, first of all, how did you get into collecting tiles?
Money. You didn't have to have much money, you see. And I started collecting tiles really because I had a friend that I played rugby with called John Cox of the Harlequins, who had marvellous 18th and 17th, 18th century Dutch tiles. I'm sure you know the kind, with soldiers on them, biblical scenes, fruit, lovely. And I collected a few of those, but then I gravitated onto English, because I'm a very patrician. You see, I've got my little cross of Union Jack here, which is very apropos of the moment. And I could buy them for £1. You see, £1 isn't going to break the bank. And I also was very, very poor in 1974, because my property company had gone bust, and it was very difficult. Can't stop, but you have to lower the costs. So that's how it started. And then, of course, as time goes on, unless you marry and have lots of children, you have a little bit more money in your pocket to spend more on. I see you've got a De Morgan tile panel there.
Yeah, I mean, De Morgan's
very fond of that, indeed.
Is well known, isn't he, for his ships? And of course
he is, yes. There's something about ships, isn't there, and galleons. And us being, maybe because we're an island race. Do you think that's it?
Could be.
And of course they're very photogenic. Sailing boats are very photogenic. William Morgan loved those, because not only was the swell of the ocean and the waves, there's the curve of the clouds, the birds in the sky are marvellously visual, aren't they? And the fish. And the men are hiding down below, the oarsmen. Marvellous. I love the whimsy.
Yes.
And the sense of humour. And most people miss that, but now I'm glad you got it here, because there's a mouse at the helm of the boat. You see, you didn't notice that, yes.
William de Morgan was producing tiles, wasn't he? I think a very creative time.
Yes.
You know, it's sort of the school of William Morris, but they were designing functional pieces that were beautiful.
Yes.
And I think that's something that we've lost.
Yes,
bit,
absolutely, yes.
Again, William de Morgan, not perhaps quite such a familiar theme, but again, he did use a lot of animals, didn't he?
Yes.
And fruit.
And kind of his classical scenes. You feel a little bit like like the Aeneid with the Aeneas and his people on a desert island looking for things, and that's a kind of a biblical sunrise and sunset, and lots of birds. Yes, it's a lovely sight, and that reminds me very well of that one used to be in Battersea Old House, which was the most famous De Morgan home. I bought it. First I bought that half there, and then I bought 2 bits there, and then I had to have this restored, and it was very, very, very difficult. And the chap, he said he would take 6 months, but it took him 3 years to get the colours right. Anyway, he got it right, and so there are 6 there that are not originals, but he's done it very well.
You talked about collecting tiles, and I mean, did you buy things at auction, or was it mainly?
The answer is you get them from wherever you can. The principal things is probably going down Portobello Road fairly early in the morning on Saturday. The next thing is to be on the list of decorative art sales at Sotheby's, Christie's, Bonhams, and all of them. And the other thing is just keeping your eye out and go into antique shops anywhere. People always tended to have a few tiles. And De Morgan were the ones that one was always trying to get. But these, which are rather nice, this is a typical Christopher Dresser style, heavily inspired by Japanese, which he visited himself, and somehow anglicised. There's something slightly English about that as well.
Yes, I mean, you can see the influence with the sort of the waves.
Yes.
But yeah, the stalks look very British, don't they?
Yes.
But
and there's a little quirky.
Yes.
Looks as if this one's going to do a nosedive into the sea. Whether he is or not, I don't know. But Dresser would do a thing like that. Now, the other thing I was going to, this is sort of one of my hobby horses, you see, is that I maintain that Dresser is bigger than William Morris.
Yes.
Which is, I hope it's very controversial, but anyway, most people wouldn't, who the hell's Christopher Dresser? You know? This is William Morris, but I mean, he did do tiles.
He did.
And they were very nice. This is a William Morris tile. So I've tried to get quite a
cross section, haven't you?
Quite a wide range. But I've got written down here, and the thing is the English or British, whatever it's called, they're very keen on Laura Ashley and Cathy Kidston. Yeah. Do you know what I mean?
Yes,
pretty, rather wild colours and scatty and nice, very nice. You know, you'd feel the Queen wouldn't be cross with you if you wore a Laura Ashley, and then furnishing houses as well. But Dresser didn't like that at all, and he was for design, and I like Dresser.
I mean, when you say that Dresser was a better, or a better artist perhaps than William Morris,
a better designer, I think. Yes,
designer. He was more refined, wasn't he, in terms of design?
Yes, more
fluidity of
no,
line.
not so much fluid. Yes, yes, more uneven and more charming, more timeless. I mean, you never get bored of looking at a lot of Christopher Dresser designs. I have, of course, got one here at the moment because they've all gone, you see. For this exhibition, the men take things out. Let me have a look at that pile. This is Edward Borden.
That's Edward Borden,
very nice chap. And rather typical. And you're not meant to look at it too carefully because that, you see, that unfortunately they don't fit together. Really, those. But you wouldn't know, really, would you? No. Wouldn't upset your eye. And they goes rather nicely together. There's the fox running that way, with 2 rabbits running after him, which is slightly kind of humorous. And then the fox, with a look of glee in his eye, has got one sitting still. He's going to get. But they're quite similar, aren't they? And the 2 looks nicer than 1.
Edward Borden, of course, we know as an artist for his illustrations rather than for his tiles. But
absolutely. In fact, I'm glad you said that, because he got rather cross with people when they said to him, I never did know him to say, oh yes, you used to do tiles for pool pottery, didn't you? Because tiles was just very kind of down. That's really decorative art, you know, like that, you know, rather down market. Whereas fine art is much posher. And I've got a friend who was a glass maker with Sam Herman, who worked with Peter Layton. I remember seeing him one day, and I said, because he's been in glass for a long time, and he's getting on a bit now. I said, Sam, what are you up to now? This is about 10 years ago. He said, well, I'm actually doing glass sculpture now. Never forgotten that, because he's obviously decided to move from the kind of, you know, the dirty cloth and the dirt and the hard work and the gnarled hands, and from that into fine art, which is much smarter. Sculpture is. So that's that.
But they're often artists. I mean, I think another one that's perhaps got overshadowed by William Morris is perhaps Voysey. And again, we saw tiles in the collection of his.
Yes, I'm looking round for the table. I collect Voysey, and I love Voysey. And I have a kind of rather strong, what is it? It's not of people who like dead things. I'm awfully sad, and I find myself very attracted to people who've had a very sad time, and Voysey had a very sad time. Did you know he died in relative poverty?
No.
He was an architect, and his stuff went out of fashion after the First World War, anyway. And he never got back again, and he lived in substantially in poverty, and had to beg people to give him work. And I had a table here, it's just gone, where he used to sit and have his meals. But I like Voysey a great deal. And he was, I think, probably England's greatest domestic architect for domestic buildings in the first part of the 20th century. And lovely tiles, too.
Yes.
He wasn't shy about tiles.
Yes.
And he did a lot of tiles for Pilkingtons. Yeah. I think he was a North Countryman, and I'm from Birkenhead, too. And had lovely tiles, lovely. Fish and Leaf. Do you know them? Can you remember the tiles?
Yeah, not all.
Anyway, unfortunately, it's very annoying, because I'd been able to point out, you see, to you, his tiles if you'd come 2 years ago.
But we talk about sort of domestic architecture. I mean, the tiles really emulate that, don't they? Because they're beautiful in their own way, but they also, it's functional design, isn't it?
Yes.
And
of course the ones that he met, I always say the Dutch housewives were obviously very fussy about their kitchens, because they must have bullied their men. Look, I want some tiles to go round. So look, it's filthy, this. Because, I mean, it's only tiles which enable one to keep something clean and tidy, isn't it? So that they started it. And I always say they were the kind of, every dog shall have his day. And they'll have their day in the maybe say the 15th and 16th centuries. And then we were good in the 19th and 20th centuries. Yeah,
very much. I mean, we touched on William Morris. I mean, he did produce a lot of functional but beautiful objects for everyday use.
Yes.
I mean, his house wasn't a museum.
No, they're certainly very attractive. And whether they are better to be on paper, I don't know. I mean, sometimes it's nice to see a material being used, which wholly appropriate to that material. They are very nice, and in fact, the Arnbridge Gorge have got a couple of 2 panels.
Yes, I mean, he designed everything, didn't he, for the room? I mean, it wasn't just...
Yes.
He always gave... And he was almost the interior designer of his day, wasn't he?
Yes.
It was stylised.
Yes, well, he certainly was more famous than Christopher Dresser. But Dresser's houses are marvellous.
Yes. I mean, in a way, there's a lot of parallels, isn't there, between Christopher Dresser and Voysey, that they've been forgotten and yet their design lives on. And
yes,
and
absolutely.
If you put a piece of Voysey furniture against a contemporary piece of furniture today, it would still stand out on its own.
Absolutely, absolutely, yes.
So, I mean, good design never really goes out of fashion, does
No,
it?
not at all.
So, this is the John Piper, which, as you rightly say, it's the Four Seasons, which is a very famous image or images that he produced. I think this was done, wasn't it, for the Tate exhibition, I think.
I think it was. I kind of came onto it a bit late, and it suddenly hit me that they were, really good, a tidy design. And so I tried to get the Four Seasons. I actually bought from him himself. He had a gallery in Fulham, didn't he?
Yeah.
And I bought two from the, and then I tried to get the other two. It was a terrible job. I had to pay a kind of enormous sum of money for the last one. But they are lovely, and I mean, I love them, aren't they? They're really...
Yeah, they're beautiful.
And they're strongly idiosyncratic.
Yeah.
And you can see his signature on them kind of from across the road, can't you?
Yes, yes.
Which I like in tiles, and I like in art to be able to recognise.
Yes, yes.
Who did things.
I mean, I think the great thing about somebody like John Piper, for example, is, I mean, in a way, the simplicity of the design. He is able to pare down his designs to fit his medium. And here, but it's still recognisable as a John Piper.
Yes.
If I saw that out of context,
It's what I'd call it's a very tidy design.
Yeah, yeah.
Very well done. Whereas you would never say that Morris was a tidy design.
No, no.
But I remember this.
Yeah.
As I see them, I remember them. Remember them. I bought that in Sotheby's. You see, it had quite a lot of chunks out of it. And therefore it went cheaply, didn't it?
Ah.
Well, that is what happens in life. And I find that my pleasure in that, which has been heavily restored here, wherever and here, is not diminished one iota for the pleasure of seeing it on the wall. Yeah. Nice oak frame, very important to have a nice oak frame.
And you've always displayed your tiles. I know there are a few
well, you see the shelving, can't you?
Yes.
Well, there's room for quite a few hundred on the shelves, and the reason there are any there now is that, frankly, when I started sorting out my collection of everything else, there were lots of cupboards, weren't there, with things at the back I hadn't touched for you. Tiles, and more tiles, so that there are a lot of tiles here that they're mostly duplicates from something I put away. But the other thing is that I cannot resist now the temptation to buy tiles. And I've also slightly widened my ambit from English tiles, because in fact some of the ones Ironbridge got are foreign, Dutch tiles. There was some Portuguese tiles, which were very lovely. There's one particular chap who worked in Portugal a lot, and they're lovely. They're very beautiful lustre.
Yes. And
quite high relief too. So that there are a lot of, I shall probably give them to the Ironbridge Gorge. I hope that it will turn out to be. Well, I want them to stand tall. Don't want to hide their light under a bushel. I mean, that's the trouble with London. Everyone thinks London is the greatest. It is great. But I think people they're cowed by London, don't you think so? And I want the Ironbridge, the museum, now to stand up and say, yes, we've got the best tile collection in the world, 1830 to 1930, English. And let someone tell them they're being big-headedly stupid or something. I always like a controversy to arise. It makes it more interesting, doesn't it?
Is there a tile or an artist that's eluded you, that you would love to have owned in, a particular piece that you don't, or do you feel that you've collected?
Well, yes. There's a on the 1, 2, 3, 4th row down. Yep. There's a black wooden frame on a small 4.5-inch tile. I kept that back from all the people, this sale I'm doing. That is a tile designed by Hector Guimard, the chap who designed the Paris Metro. And it was executed. He worked with the manufacturers, who I'm afraid I can't tell you the name of them. And it's kind of glass. It's chipped, chunky bits of glass, molded, not to top temperature so that they would fuse completely, but in chunkiness. And this was for his house called Castle Henriette, which was in Sèvres, which was being demolished. And I live kind of at watching these wonderful things being destroyed. And I'll often dream of being as vocal and persuasive as, what's the name of the chap who saved the archway at King's Cross, you know. Benjamin. Absolutely. And that house was demolished, which was terrible. I did save a window grill, which was sold by one of the people who was there when it was demolished and saved as much as they could, and gave it to the V&A, which you'll see. Huge grill in the metal department, very much in the Art Nouveau style, swirling. So that is the tile that I'm dreaming of finding more of those, more like that. And actually there's so many wonderful tiles done in the world. People decorative did things that they'll always be turning up. I mean, the row down, there are 4 on the right, the second row down. They're of Rotterdam during the war, 1939, 1940, 1941, 42, 45. And actually I've only got 4 there, but I had 5, there was 1 missing. But the one that's missing, a friend came and said, "Good God, I can see that's where my flat is." It was one of the few buildings that wasn't demolished in the war. The Germans bombed everything in Rotterdam because it was a very important port for distributing arms and so on. And so I gave him that, but that was interesting. And there always are interesting things in tiles. There's a thing called TAX. Have you heard of TAX?
Yes. Tiles
and Architectural Ceramic Society. Yeah. I'm a member. And they're always finding wonderful things. So that's that. And I would like to have been there, and very much regretted missing being there in, I think it was 1943, when the bombs were raining down on Liverpool. And the museum, the main museum there, was heavily bombed. And inside the foyer there was a tile panel of who are the big people in tile makers up in the north? Anyway, there was a huge panel of tiles which illustrated all the operations and works that went on in Liverpool, probably 1910. It was a direct hit and it was demolished, this tile panel. But they just swept it up and threw it away. But I can get, nowadays, you can add dust together. Yeah. You can restore things. And I greatly regret they did that, because if I'd been there to sweep it up and could have had it restored, it'd be lovely to have.
In terms of, we talked earlier about your wonderful donation to the Chatfield Tile Museum. What do you hope your lasting legacy is for that collection?
I think when you get old, think of the young. I'd like people from schools to come and see it and think that's a marvellous thing. I'm going to make tiles. And the people there, Chris Cox, he is the man in charge of making tiles for the Palace of Westminster, because they wear out. Have you been there?
Yes, yes.
Seen them, they're worn out?
Yes.
Well, it's like painting the Forth Bridge.
Yes.
So he's working on that. And I would like young people to be stimulated by what they can do with tiles. Very, very easy to do. You only have to have a 6-inch square thing, and then you can decorate it and have... I bought something last Saturday from... There are people doing things. A lot of these tiles are just people just doing them. And they then get a bit better, and then they can open a little shop, or they sell through a shop, art, studio, pottery. So that's what I like.
And one last question I just want to touch on is, you talked about tile restoration. Are there restorers that are trained in that? How do they become a tile restorer?
I would imagine almost certainly there are. Of course, in the old days, her mother, particularly if she lost her husband, she had a son, she would put him out into an apprenticeship, which is the way it was always done. Electricians, plumbers, she paid the man something to teach my son how to do it, and that is the best way to do it, isn't it? A good workman, a good artificer will show much better than going to an evening class, won't they?
Absolutely. Do you think we've lost some of those sort of practical
I think
skills?
we've lost so much that it's really exhaustingly depressing. But one must never give up.
No. And you'll continue collecting?
Yes, I do, yes. I still hope to find a Zulaga vase. Have you heard of Zulaga?
No.
Well, he was a chap that made metal work in Toledo, in Spain. And his most famous work was a commission from Owen Jones. Does that ring a bell? Owen Jones?
Yes, it does.
A very famous chap. And Owen Jones was commissioned to do a pair of vases to go in Font Hill, which was a famous house. I'm just trying to remember the name of the owner. I can't do it for the moment. And these vases were this high, and they're inlaid with silver and gold. Zulaga, when he got the commission, said, look, you'll have to give me £550, which that is the cost of the silver and gold to inlay into these vases. Can you imagine that in 1840 or so? Can you imagine that?
Gosh.
And so these were made, and in fact, of course, then it got sold, this got sold that, and two of them, the two appeared. They were £13,000 in '74, but I had the property collapsed, and I haven't got it. But I should have, should have just got another mortgage, Now they'd be worth millions.
But you've obviously, in terms of your collection, it's been the beauty, hasn't it? It's not been the monetary thing that you collected.
Well, it's a funny thing is that sometimes the really, really beautiful things are rather expensive.
Yes.
Not talking about the opposite sex either.
But you've clearly enjoyed collecting.
Yes, I did.
It's given you a lot of
the chase. The chase is the exciting thing, to try and find something that other people haven't seen.
And when you bring it home for that first time, whether it be a tile or a piece of artwork, you have to find a place for it.
Well, it never was difficult to find a place, because there are a lot of places here.
Yeah.
And sometimes the tiles had to kind of slightly ride up on each other. As you see, the depth of the Dexian wrapping are there. If it's an encaustic tile, like the big one on the top, there's not room for another two of those because it would slip off. But otherwise, there's enough room for a 6-inch tile, which is only kind of 2/3 of an inch, a third of an inch, half an inch thick, will go there. So it's not a question of gloating over it, it's just putting it there so that it goes, as your eye goes round every day, it gets wiped with pleasure, you see, looking at the tiles.
And you know, with a tile collection, when you buy some, do you move it around? I know lots of people that have lots of things that every so often they do a sort of
No, I'm not. I don't move at all. No.
You just
Because moving would cause great irritation and anxiety for dust.
Yeah.
But if it just stays there, it's just. But it is quite nice. I mean, this is a Alfred Stevens Lion.
Yes.
Which I like those very much. I've got a wooden one which goes on as a newel post. And actually to take that on your knee with an old pair of trousers on and clean it, dust it off to begin with, and then a bit of white spirit to take the kind of more dust off, more dirt off. And then when it's clean, just giving it a touch of best wax boot polish, very light brown, just a tiny little bit, and doing it very quickly, and then polishing it. It looks wonderful. I can see it now. Looks quite nice. Yes, now.
It does.
Don't want to overdo it. Only do it once a year with a little bit of wax.
Yeah.
But it's so lovely.
Mr. Scott, thank you so much.
Yes, not at all.
Thank you. It's been a real pleasure.
I could go on forever.